Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
This is Werewolf the Podcast, and this is your werewolf Will. We're on part 2 of Werewolf versus the Trophy Vampires. Please go back and listen to the previous episode if you already haven't done, then that would kind of be like better, because then you would know what's going on and stuff. If you would like to support the show, then you can buy me a coffee at Support the Show, link down in the description. Other than that, love you deeply, people. There's a group there and Twitter handles and all sorts of cool things if you want to join me in, my social media life. Let's carry on with the story. So you make one teeny tiny terrible mistake and the whole world collapses in on you. You kill the wrong vampire and then all these pointy toothed weird goth bastards start hunting you for some strange teach the werewolf a fucking lesson reason. I mean, it was a case of him or me and I'd won out of sheer undignified luck. I hate the saying you create your own luck, because I feel if the police had not luckily turned up when I had ripped off the head of one vampire, I would be the dead thing myself. The problem with killing said vampire was that I had left his sister and lover, yeah, we'll get into that. She had witnessed said killing and she was a little pissed off about it. Well, probably more than pissed off. Perturbed, maybe? Is that a better word? Not sure. I'd now gotten back to England after my Far East tour. I'm not sure if that is the correct terminology when talking about Japan and those places, but it seems to fit. It's not meant in any racist kind of way. It is kind of far out east where from we are, so I'm sorry if it's terminologically wrong. If it's taken that way by you, then that's on you. It's about as far east as I can manage without coming back to the west again, don't you think? In Japan, unfortunately, I'd fallen out with a vampire bitch. Well, less of the falling out with. I'd murdered her brother and her lover, which we'll get to. Well, murdered is probably not the right word for it. Murder implies killing without a justified reason. And he was trying to kill me, so I may for once have been justified in the killing that I did. So, not murder, what would it be? Manslaughter. No, that's wrong, because he was no longer a human. Well, he is a human, but an undead one. So wait, he was undead. Does that mean he was dead, so I couldn't kill him because he was dead already? So I really could not have killed him, so I did not commit any crime. Oh, fuck, who knows? I stopped a vampire by removing its head, which meant that it no longer was a vampire. It was a no longer undead, dead vampire thing. God, it's so confusing, this supernatural bullshit, isn't it? I was a bit annoyed at the end results of pulling his head off, though. You know that the body did not all burn up at once like you see in the films. No, it just lay there all bloody and dead-redder, if that's a word. It was simple. I'd pissed off a female vampire person. Well, I think she was female. It's hard to tell with the Vampire Nation. They have all become androgynous pretty things, whatever their sex, and have taken the Anne Rice books pretty literally. No Nosferatus. I mean, sex and gender do not bother me, but I would not know without given pronouns. When you meet a vampire, you have to ask them specifically their pronouns. I mean, what happened to the Nosferatu-looking motherfuckers? All weird and unattractive with monster-like features. Oh, now vampires all possess this glamour that makes us look so sexy. It's like something sexy from a 90s Marilyn Manson video. What was it? Tainted Love or something, when all the sexy goths turn up at a party and join in with kids. Weirdly, it's okay that the middle-aged Marilyn and his crew are at the youngsters' party. I mean, he's a creepy fuck at the best of the times, and now what we found out about him, But this makes him even more creepy than Mr. Creepy from Creepyland on a particularly creepy day of the week. Fucking creepy. Why do I get sidetracked all? I do apologise. I had killed her brother after they had threatened to kill me. I had done the thing of letting the baddie do the threatening and the shit-talking while I got myself into a position where I could nail one of the bastards first. I was brought up with a posit who always told me I should retaliate first, so I took his lead and killed the skinny fop. They apparently were going to hunt and kill me, so it only seemed fair that I did it. Apparently, I was better sport than the human prey that they were used to. Ashy head, bloody blast, blood managed to say. I managed to transform and grab him. If they had shut up and just attacked me, they would have won very easily, but nah, they had to push it and give me a chance. They should have watched a few more Bond movies instead of reading Anne fucking Rice books. Baddies should never gloat before the kill. It lets the goodie win. In this case, did I just class myself as a goodie? I have to admit, though, I was really glad that they'd not gone down the road of being sparkly, misunderstood beasties, lovelorn, and forever teenagers. Have I mentioned how much I hate Twilight? How have we gone from Salem's Lot and Nosferatu to fucking Edward the Sparkly Bunny? Jesus. Could you imagine the self-hate I would have had if sparkly vampires had killed me? Thank goodness that there is no afterlife or any crap vampires. I can put up with the androgynous evil gits because, well, it's kind of sexy as fuck. I mean, the two that came to kill me looked like something crossed between the elves from Lord of the Rings and a BDSM catalogue. It was a nice fusion. Oh, and that video in the 90s I talked about, the Marilyn one, has meant that I have a thing for goths now. I mean, a real thing. You may ask where I'm going with all this, and the answer is I really do not know, but let me try and get back to the story. I'd removed the vampire from the world, and his sister was annoyed at me for it. Sorry about that. It was like 800 sort of words of complete waffle. Hopefully at this point you realise I'm being hunted by a furious vampire because I took her brother from her and that she's very, very good looking. I was walking down ye olde Canal Street in Manchester after a day at the races. I was on my way home and thought that I would take a wee wander along the fabled Canal Street to see what the night would bring. If you have never heard of Canal Street in Manchester, I can probably give you a simple clue that will allow you to work out the nature of that Heaven's Road. The sign on the bridge was in a constant state of being replaced and then being re-graffitied. Every time the Canal Street sign went up, it was spell-checked to remove the C and the S from the beginning of each word. Can you work out what it says? Yep, that's right. Anal treats. I hope that gives you the nature of the road that I was now wandering along. Outside the bordellos were a host of the alphabet community, doing their thing that they are renowned for. That, of course, is partying. I always wondered what the quiet introverts of this community do. I mean, it seems to be a thing that if you are other, I mean the LBGTQA+, you have the need to party all the time. Me, personally, I think I'm greedy. But according to, these community things, I'm either bisexual, pansexual, or omnisexual. Well, whatever I am, I think I'm greedy, but anyway, I'm not particularly eager to party all the time. Sometimes my favourite sound is the freshly brewed coffee entering the warmed cup. So I have to wonder if I'm actually a member of this mad community or am I just greedy? I see sex as all the same, the only change are the controls changing, from joysticks to touchpads, and there are many more ways to load up that game than that. Getting back to the story, I was walking down the Treat Street to see if anything fun was happening. I would see 100 people's nights unfold before me as I walked, and there was always a chance that I could get involved in and, of course, ruin one of those nights thoroughly. I had just been distracted by a young couple, a twink and a bear, wandering hand in hand down the main pavement. The bear was a giant hairy monster of a man. I mean, out of this context, he looked somewhat like the most heterosexual man that you can ever imagine. He had a big beard and moustache. I mean, the moustache was shaped carefully and he had no neck beard, so you could see he was a Care Bear. He wore shorts and a red and black plaid tied shirt and tied just above his vast belly, where his hips should have been. It exposed his tummy to the July evening's warm air, and it was not something that I would hope to have displayed in front of me ever. His partner was a bleach blonde-haired skinny camp boy. He wore a vest much too big for himself and a shiny silver waistcoat, and he skipped along after his Care Bear, chattering away into the night. I watched them pass, smiling from ear to ear. It was the most entertaining street in Manchester. I could go into more detail, but I haven't got time. Just pop down and join the party. It's well worth it. Distracted by these two, I did not notice her in the shadows of the Velvet Hotel doorway. As I walked past, she stepped out and linked my arm. I did not react in surprise or fear. I didn't even flinch. I mean, I was a little surprised that she stepped out of nowhere to be there, but I knew she would catch up with me at some point. She held a stiletto dagger that she pricked through my very expensive Boglioli jacket. I hope that she realised that she was ruining a very beautiful thing that had taken a lot of effort to create and much more money to buy. What a bitch. If she stuck that knife into me, it would pierce my liver and be very painful, but the tearing of my jacket hurt me much more mentally. At this point, I wanted to kill her, but it would be interesting to see where this was going. I knew she was going to have to tell me what was going to happen to me in great detail. It had been a failing in our last meeting that had cost her the price of a dead brother. I could have killed her right now if I had the mind. Retaliate first was my meditative mantra, and to be honest, I really should have killed her at this point to make my life easier, because I like my life to be interesting, but this was going to be interesting and annoying, not a great mixture for an evening. You realise that you are going to die for what you have done, do you not? She whispered in my ear. I looked up from the dagger and the hole in my jacket. Do you realise you deserve to die for what you've just done? I said, pointing at the hole that she'd created in my jacket. She looked at the hole and laughed. It's material and of no consequence, she said. I could have ripped her throat out there, right out of her pretty little neck for this level of understatement. The utter bitch! Could she not see the tears in my eyes? You killed my brother, and for this you must die, she tried to say in a most frightening way. I pointed at the jacket. Well, in my eyes, we're fucking even. Look what you did to my beauty. Silence! She whisper-shouted. Yeah, I know whisper-shouted doesn't sound like a thing, but I'm sure you know what I mean. I didn't go into silence, but I continued my sentence just under the volume she could make sense of. If I'd been a 14-year-old girl, it would have been the equivalent of that mumbled response to give. I mean, she didn't realise how upset I really was. My brother was my only care, my only love. What? What do you mean, did you two, is that not like incest and shit? Now, I only said this to upset her, upset her more. I don't understand why I do it at times. Why do I have to stir the shit further? Had I not done enough in killing her brother? Did I not have to take it further by suggesting that she fucked him? We need to keep the bloodline pure, doggy, she replied, which in my eyes meant that she did fuck him, but I wouldn't explore this any further, because if she did, there was no point in rubbing it in if it didn't annoy her. I also was a little bit shocked that she'd said that. Maybe she was joking. I wasn't sure where to go with it. I was also still upset about the fucking hole in my jacket. We walked a little further until I unlinked my arm in a particular busy part of the street amongst the drunk, stoned and drugged as they danced around in joy. Look, what are you gonna do? Can you just do it, please? Because I need to get home and repair this now, don't I? You want me to do it here and now? She asked. Well, it would seem the quicker the better. I just don't want to waste any more time, to be honest. We can just get this out of the way. What on earth are you waiting for? Anyway, don't draw it fucking out. Two more of the things stepped out of the dark. They had to be vampires because they were, well, so cool. They looked like someone had dragged them out of the Matrix films, all black long leather, latex and sunglasses at midnight. Two male-ish creatures were very androgynous and emitting very dangerous vibes that even I could sense. She nodded to something behind me. I turned around and saw two female-ish creatures again, Matrix extras covered in leather, latex and latex and leather. She smiled at them and then turned back to me. They strangely fitted into this environment pretty well. They stood at four corners of a square looking in. Then I noticed four more behind them and four more behind them. Ah, shit. This was it. I was gonna die. They all looked at me and were only still individuals on the road of milling people. All were posing in the same manner, hands palm on palm, held in front of them like an inverted prayer. I think that the best thing for you to do, my wolf, is to come with us and not cause any embarrassing scenes, she told me. She had no idea that was one of the things I lived for. Embarrassing scenes. In my head, I heard Fenn start to yell his protests at the situation. He told me to kill, murder and destroy those in front of me. He was upset at this treatment, and some of the language he was using was fairly choice, to say the least. I tried to calm him in my head, telling him that we would deal with the situation in turn. I mean, I had no idea what I was going to do, but that always excited me. The best stories that I remember are the ones that happened by accident. Then it came to me. Flash mob! I shouted at the top of my voice and started the great Los Del Rio song, Hey Macarena. 1, 2, 3, 4, I cried, my hands above my head clapping. Then I started the words. The people on the street stopped. They tried to work out what the fuck was happening and turned to see me singing and doing that godforsaken dance in the middle of the street, surrounded by my latex-clad friends. It was working. The populaces of the street were hooked and the Macarena was breaking out all over the road. The crowd was singing as they did it and it was spreading like, well, the Macarena through a gay audience. I kept clapping and singing as more and more folk joined in. Then it got to a critical mass as the crowd took over from me in the direction of the song. People were coming out of the bars to join in on this mass happening. Macarena! The vampires, far too cool to do anything as unhip as Macarena, were swept up in the dance, being repulsed and distressed by the awful, lovely, uncool, happening, kitsch event. They'd not even noticed me go. I had shrunk down and gone. I ran the street in my man form. I was looking for somewhere to hide, although I had no idea if I could hide from these things. I knew that they could travel fast, but I did not know how fast that they could travel. I ran by a hall with the Great Phil, spiritualist, up as the advertising hoarding. There was a small line outside which I circumvented to run through the large double doors and past the ticket salesperson, giving them a £20 note and moving on to the hall itself to try and hide in the darkness of the crowd. The Great Phil was on stage and greeting and meeting the audience as they sat down. He was obviously a local celebrity and his public knew him well. I moved towards the stage, took an empty seat just off the third row and sunk low in my chair to try to fit into the crowd, which was quite difficult as it seemed to be primarily women middle-aged and above. Eventually the lights dropped and the music started, the curtains closed and the crowd was brought to a pregnant hush. Through the millennia, mediums have contacted those have passed before us onto the ethereal plane. The ability to speak to the loved ones we have lost has brought calm, peace, and a sense of joy to those that need to talk both in this world and the next. Please put your hands together for the greatest medium this side of the Pennines, the Great Phil. The intro was done by a very camp northerner who turned out to be a very camp northerner called Phil, who was Phil the Magnificent, or Great, or whatever, himself. The music crackled through the crappiest of sound systems and the curtains now opened to the Great Phil standing at the left of the stage ready to begin his show. He walked to the stage centre under rapturous applause from the excited crowd and took some time to roll his shirt sleeves up. This was a developed system to get the crowd to clap themselves out and get his séance silent. He smiled, making feigned eye contact with members of the crowd and pointed at one or two of the regulars he saw. Tonight, we come together to meet those that have gone on before us. Those that have passed yet all still wish to get in contact with those that need to hear their words. There are no guarantees that I will hear from your loved ones. They must have a reason, unfinished business or a need to speak to give them peace. Please give me some time to prepare and reach out to those that wish to speak. Great Phil then closed his eyes and started humming and pressed his hands to his eyes. I began to get distracted by him. He was a good showman, and my ADHD had called me on from the threat of the vamps to see what the fuck was going to happen here right now. I actually sat up in my seat to see where this would go. He hummed and shook as though getting into some kind of mental state. He suddenly opened his eyes and screamed in shock. His whole body shook as he looked around the hall, and he fell back into an oversized armchair, covered his ears and closed his eyes, taking a little of a fetal position in the chair. The audience went into a mass confusion. They were obviously not used to the Great Phil reacting like this, and the crowd's voices were lifted in concern and confusion. Slowly he calmed and shook in his seat. He rocked back and forth in silence for a while, and the crowd fell back into silence themselves once more. All were waiting to see where this show would go. The man on the stage turned to the crowd. He held his head in his hands, and the shock and tears were apparent in his eyes. The man was terrified. His voice, once strong and full of vigour, was now tried and stressed. This suddenly entranced me. I've got a room full of souls here today. They're all here for one reason, to protest their deaths, he announced, eyes glistening and tears running. I glanced around like many of the audience, wanting to see these torn souls. Sadly, I couldn't. It was apparent I didn't have the gift. There are men, women, and children here, and have all been torn from life before they should have been called. He leant his forehead into his hand, rocking back and forth to take a moment before continuing. This was getting so interesting. This room was full of tortured souls. I like the idea of the room being full of tortured souls. Let's see what the tortured souls would have to say. I've got a man here before me. One of the crowd. He's talking to me about a monster that killed him. A beast. A wolf. No, a wolfman. Many agree with him. A wolfman. They were killed. Murdered by a werewolf. They're saying there is a werewolf. And he's in this room. Now the crowd was a little confused as to what the fuck was going on. This was not how these nights went. Phil would talk to Auntie Doreen, who would tell you how much she loved you and that she was happy where she was and that you should not worry and carry on with life. Phil had obviously lost his mind, and we all know he liked to drink and a bit of a snort, but this was going too far. Again, Phil leant forward in his seat, his hands covering his eyes, rocking back and forth. Silence slowly fell once more on the audience. He looked now up and down and looked around the room. Where are you? Where are you, you monster? You killed all these people here. Oh my God, how could you? Now some people were frightened. Some were confused. Some thought that this was Phil taking the show to the next level. His eyes searched the crowd and then met mine. He stopped and, although petrified, pointed a shaking finger in my direction. Who knew this? The Great Phil was actually fucking honest. I really wish I could have seen all those dead people, all those souls. I might be able to count them to see how many people I'd actually killed. Were they mine alone? Were they all that Fenn and his humans had killed in the past as well? So many questions. You! He shout-whispered. You see? Now a shout-whisper is a definite thing. He then slumped into his seat and broke down while the crowd went from silence into slight group hysteria. Gasps and screams and panic filled the hall. Bodies started to move and leave. I should move on too. Then the vamps entered the fray. For fuck's sake, they spoil everything. That's the end of the episode. Just a big thank you to everyone who's donated to me already. It's very nice to get all those coffees. Buy the book if you would, that'd be cool. Come and find me on Twitter. Come and find me on Facebook. It's all down in the description for the podcast. And finally, I just need to say, I love you.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.